76 years ago this month, on September 2nd, 1945, Japan signed its unconditional surrender, and World War II was over. The cost of that epic global conflict was mind-blowing. 60 million people had died, including nearly 500,000 from the United States. Countless dollars had been spent and would be spent to rebuild, and the world was never the same. But on that single day, with the stroke of a pen aboard the USS Missouri from its vantage point in Tokyo Bay, the turn finally began, and the war was over. And it came because of surrender. And of course, the surrender was one-sided, two sides if you count Germany's surrender with Japan's. But that's how wars end, right? I mean, somebody wins and somebody loses, and surrender at some point becomes the only alternative to annihilation. In war, surrender means you give up, you win, I lose. And for a soldier on the losing side of that equation, surrender is humiliation and disgrace and dishonor. After Japan's surrender, there were many suicides among their soldiers. They just couldn't live with the idea that they had lost. They had to surrender. But not all surrender is dishonor, especially if we'll step outside of the idea of war and into another kind of battle. This kind of battle is not one between two countries, but it's between two people. This battle has striking similarities to war, but its outcome is one that is not available in war, at least a possible outcome. And it turns out that this outcome is the only pathway to greatness. What I'm talking about today is the secret to every marriage reaching its full potential, to reaching the height of the blessing that God always had in mind for you. So whether you're married now, or someday you might be, or you have married people somewhere in your purview, you should pay attention. Because I'm about to give you the ultimate pathway for your marriage to be all that you ever dreamed it could be. See, I have a theory. And it's not really a theory, if I'm telling the truth, because I've lived it and I've seen it and I've proved it with 1,000 case studies, none of which are documented, but all of which are very real. Here's the thesis. There is nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. There is nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. I've made that statement now to hundreds of couples on their wedding day in front of their families and their friends, and everybody's smiling and everybody's nodding. And in theory, they know this is true. In practice, they know there's a conflict, though, that's built into this statement. And I want to show it to you. There is nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. It's 100% true, but there's a secret that not everybody figures out. The key and the conflict is found in the word when. There's nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right, which implies that marriage works right some of the time and not all of the time. The truth be told, for many couples, not most of the time. And some people think that the dividing line between those two scenarios, between great marriage and not so great marriage, is just luck. And some people are just lucky enough to have a great marriage, and some people just had bad luck. And then there are those who blame God, as if He looks at this couple and decides to bless them with blissful joy and unity and dooms this other couple to division and strife. The truth is that neither fate nor God chooses whether or not your marriage is great. Instead, the greatness quotient of your marriage is all on you. I've been married now for almost 32 years, and I have been a student of marriage for nearly that entire time. And I promise you this, so listen up if you're married, because it doesn't get any more real, it doesn't get any more relevant than this. Husbands and wives, together you have the power to achieve great marriage, or not. God gave you that ability, but He doesn't force you to act on it. A great marriage is not something that just happens. It's something you make happen. How? One verse. One obscure verse from the Bible that will pivot your future, that will bring you blessing like you cannot imagine. I'm not kidding about that. 9 crucial words that will determine whether you achieve great marriage or not. Here it is. From Ephesians 5:21, the Apostle Paul writes, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And the concept that comes out of this that makes marriage great is what we call mutual submission. Submit to one another, that is mutual submission, out of reverence for Christ. And mutual submission can easily be confused with the idea of surrender, like an army that surrenders in defeat and in humiliation. You win and I lose. The truth be told, that's how many marriages actually do it. In the epic and ongoing battle for each of us to get what we want, what I want, we move towards only one of 2 conclusions. Either I'm going to win, that's victory, or I'm going to lose, that's defeat. Or actually, it's more like victory and defeat. One of us on one side winning and the other on the other side losing. But mutual submission is not exactly like surrender in a war. It's not, mutual submission is not my last-ditch effort to survive. It's not my final act before I get annihilated. Instead, it's an entire shift in the way that I think about me and you and us and God. Mutual submission in marriage is actually part of my allegiance to Jesus. See, the most important person on the planet, the most important human being anywhere, is supposed to be the one who was standing next to you on your wedding day. And he or she was supposed to be the most important person on the planet, not just in the company of all the music and the flowers and the dresses, but from that day all the way until the day where you breathe your last breath. Your spouse is supposed to be the most important person. Not your kids, though you love them like crazy. Not your parents, though you should always love and honor them. Not your colleagues, not your friends, and most importantly, not yourself. When you get married, you're agreeing that you are no longer the priority of your life. He surrenders his life to her in submission. She surrenders her life to him in submission. Now the truth is that there are many days in marriage when the battle within you is to serve yourself. This is true for all of us. It's certainly true for me. I want never entirely goes away. In fact, I can tell you that all of the strife I've ever had in my marriage has come from those 2 words, has come from I want. I want is like a lingering ember in a fire. You can put out the fire, but the hot coals remain, and every once in a while, they just flare up again. Years ago, I was in the habit of having a bowl of cereal for my bedtime snack, and I would look forward to that thing all day long. Oh, the feel of a crisp frosted flake coated in cold 2%. It was like a bowl of ice cream to me. And every night, my closing ritual was to go downstairs and hook up with Tony the Tiger and take my bowl back to bed and watch a little TV while I ate. But apparently, the crunching sound of every spoonful was like fingernails on a chalkboard to my bride. And she would angrily toss and turn. And finally, after a long time of this, she finally had enough. And she said to me, "You sound like a horse eating a bucket of apples. You can have your cereal, but you cannot bring it into this room anymore." The nerve. I was on my side of the bed, a king-sized bed that she made me buy a few years earlier so that she could be as far away from me as possible. I liked the twin bed that we slept together in for years, but apparently she didn't. So with my cereal on this enormous mattress, I didn't cross the line. I didn't breach her side. I didn't leave any crumbs. I even washed my bowl. I had done everything right. If we had hired a mediator over this conflict, I would have won this dispute hands down. I could have won the argument that day, But I discovered a better phrase. Not I want, but more than that. I want my cereal in bed, but more than that, I want to take care of you. That is mutual submission. And I learned it a long time ago, and it meant that me and Tony the Tiger could no longer sleep together. Our rendezvous were forever limited from that point forward to the kitchen table. And here's the thing, all kidding aside, I didn't move my cereal eating ritual with the smallest morsel of animosity or anger or resentment. I could have stood on I want or even I deserve. I didn't have to move, but I did. And I did it gladly because I knew that, but more than that, I want to serve you is the key to great marriage. And don't forget, there's nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. Of course, there have been a lot more serious subjects than eating cereal in bed along the way. But even on the big things, mutual submission wins the day. So husbands, when your number one priority is to serve your wife even above yourself, and wives, when your number one priority is to serve your husband even above yourself, then the phrase, but more than that, I want to take care of you, wins the day for you too. And the fight is no longer about gaining more territory, but over giving it away. Many of you, though, you've heard me talk on this before. Maybe today I thought maybe you'd like to hear my wife Susan's perspective on this, which might be a little different. Would you like to hear from her, Susan?
So this is not the place that I'm used to standing. Obviously, Brian is the gifted teacher, but this is a subject I'm really passionate about. So while this is a little out of my comfort zone, mutual submission is so important that I wanted to share my perspective with you. The truth is that submission makes some people, well, many people, especially many women, bristle up. We fought hard as women for rights that were denied to us for most of history, and the right to be considered a person and not property, the right to own property, the right to vote, the right to be treated as an equally valuable person. So it's natural for us as women to want to push back on a word like submission. I get it. I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being forced to do things that I don't want to do. Like Brian said, I want is still very much alive inside of me. But I want has a companion. I don't want. And that sentiment is equally powerful. When it comes to mutual submission, neither of those phrases can win. The word submission has some connotations to it that I don't think really apply to a marriage relationship. It's not supposed to be a forced thing or a one-sided lifestyle. Mutual submission is, well, mutual. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. If we don't start there, we'll never get the rest of our relationship right. Can I speak to husbands here for a second? If you're using this passage of the Bible to be abusive or overbearing or as a way of manipulating your wife so you can get what you want, then you're just wrong. That's not at all what mutual submission is about. And to wives, your husband gets some additional instructions here in Ephesians that are way harder than mutual submission. Let me show you. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This is just 4 verses after mutual submission, except the Apostle Paul is now talking just to husbands, and he's saying that your husband must be willing to die for you. That's the kind of husband I want, someone who is willing to do anything for me. Anything. Anything. I mean, Jesus fed 5,000. So that means my husband should be willing to cook for me. Jesus washed his disciples' dirty, stinky feet. So he should be willing to clean for me. Jesus laid down his life for us, and I know my husband is willing to die for me. It doesn't mean that he always does those things, but he's willing. And when I look at Brian and I say, this is important to me, whatever I say next, he does. But if submission is mutual, then I should be willing to have the same posture. I really hate cooking, but I'll do it for him. And I'd prefer that he was neater and more handy around the house and less impulsive. And it would be nice if he would sit still for longer than 5 minutes at a time. But my preferences aren't really my priority. So when Brian looks at me and says, this is important to me, whatever he says next, I do. And we don't abuse this privilege. Instead, we submit to each other out of a deep sense of trust and out of respect for Jesus Christ, who we both ultimately submit our lives to. When we're getting this core part of our marriage right, well, this is what it looks like for us.
It looks like I don't really care if she ever cooks another meal. Ever.
His dirty socks on the floor don't even bother me.
She can pick whatever paint color she wants.
He doesn't have to live up to be the handyman that my dad is.
She can leave the mounds of unfolded clothes on the sofa forever.
I don't care if he ever puts his dirty dishes in the dishwasher.
This makes it sound like we live like total slobs.
Well, we're being honest,
the
right?
shoe fits.
So if we are being completely honest, we still don't get mutual submission right 100% of the time. For example, I have been waiting for this time. You have a seat for a second.
Okay, all right.
I get to tell a story. So recently we were doing some major rearranging of a bunch of stuff from our home, which meant we had to load some furniture into a trailer. And I don't know if you realize this or not, but when you put big things and small things and odd-shaped furniture and mattresses and boxes into a box on wheels, well, it's kind of like a life-size 3D puzzle. And if you get it right, and there is a right way to do it,
okay.
Well, then everything arrives at the new place and nothing gets scratched or broken. But if it isn't loaded in well, then you have some intense discussions on how to do it right. So we went back and forth for what felt like an hour on the right way to do this. Well, my way, you measure the pieces, you measure the trailer, you wrap everything in moving blankets or bubble wrap or both, and then you carefully plan out with a spreadsheet in advance, if possible, where every single item will go. You're taking into account how much space is between the pieces and the boxes and the mattresses so that nothing turns over or slides or has room to wiggle, because that could cause damage or breakage. And then you document where each said piece is in the trailer, because of course you've already labeled each box and mattress and piece of furniture with a color-coded label. And on that matches the same color-coded label to the new location, so that when extra moving help come and they carefully unload, they get the correct boxes and said furniture to the right location. And they match it to the color-printed map of each room in the new location. His way, you just throw it all in there and hope it fits, which it never does. And you pray it makes it in one piece, which it doesn't. And, remember I said we went back and forth on this for a while? Somehow, we finally agreed on how to get this stuff loaded. But it was tense. And we were hungry. We were ready for dinner. So after we grabbed something to eat, I turned to him and I said, we do some things really well together, but packing a trailer is not one of them. I mean, no one was submitting to each other that day.
Well, look, I need to jump in here, because That's not exact. Look, you said we finally agreed together. We never agreed together. First of all, by the time Susan is done doing all the documenting and the spreadsheeting and the putting the dots on and the color coding, I could have made 3 trips. So here's what really happened. I knew this was going to happen. So I said to her, look, I'll be the muscle and you do the planning. Like, you strategize this thing to death. I don't care. You tell me where to put stuff and I'll load it in. And I never said a word. That's how this went. So we get out there, we get some stuff loaded in, and then we had some other pieces, and you didn't know where they went. And so I say, I just decided I'm going to be completely quiet. So I didn't say a word. And she studied it, and then she says these horrifying words. Guys, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. She says, I'm not really sure what to do. That's a trap. Like, this is a total setup. Best thing you can do is say nothing. I don't know what to do. I said nothing. I just waited. And I waited a long time. And then I looked up at her, I made eye contact, kept my mouth shut, and she said, I don't really know what to do. And so I waited some more. And then finally I said, well, tell me what you'd like me to do, and I'll do it. She said, I don't know. I really don't know what to do. Then she said, the worst kind of setup, she said, what do you think? Do not answer that question. But I just fell for it that day. And so I took a piece of furniture. After she said that, I couldn't wait anymore. I finally took a piece of furniture, and I took it into the trailer, and I set it inside. And she said, oh, no, that's not going to work. You can't put that there. Which I knew was going to happen in the first place. So this story that we just told you about packing the trailer, it is completely true. I mean, it really pretty much happened just like you heard it from each of our perspectives. And we put it on display for you today because we want you to see not just how it happened, but more than that, how it ended. See, we cared far more about how we ended up than how the furniture ended up. Whether she was right or I was right, whether she won or I won, none of that mattered if our marriage didn't win. And our marriage only wins when we value it above everything else.
To me, submission is more about loving and trusting each other than trying to exert authority over anyone. When Brian does weddings, he uses the word honor in the vows that the bride and groom say to each other. I love this part. They say, I honor you with all that I am and all that I have. And it's not as much about me submitting to you or you to me, but how I'm honoring my husband and God and what he wants for our marriage. When we're thinking about the other person and not ourselves, putting each other's needs above our own, we're behaving more like Christ, and we're able to nurture a marriage that honors each other and him. So Brian always told me that leading and teaching at PCC is what he feels like God has called him to do, and that's true. But also, he said if our relationship was not healthy, he would quit if he thought that that's what it would take to have a healthy marriage. And that would be a sacrifice for him, but I truly believe he would do that. I know he would, because he reminds me that I'm the most important human being on the planet to him, and that he'll serve me to his last breath. I do that too. We went through a season where Brian was a little frustrated because I was working so much. I'm on staff here at our church, and there are seasons where I'm just working a lot. Anyway, as we talked through that one time, I told Brian what my motivation was. While I love working with people and kids and building structures and mapping out details for PCC initiatives, my ultimate motivation was to help Brian succeed. In my mind, I was serving the church and serving my husband at the same time. Well, that was a game changer. I could see it in him immediately. Instead of work taking me away from him, he saw my time at work as my sacrifice for him. And it was, even though I love my work. I could have chosen to pursue another career or do something else altogether, but pouring energy into the church was a way for me to help him while also filling my soul and living out my calling. I think we make a pretty good team. Well, when we're not packing a trailer. He doesn't lord anything over me, any authority over me, and I feel safe to express my needs and wants. We decide together on things that matter.
But it's more than negotiated decision-making. And it's really better than compromise. It's never win-lose or win-lose. It doesn't go like that. It's mutual submission. And mutual submission is always win-win. She puts me above her, and I put her above me. And when we do that, everybody gets what they need. And instead of fighting to get more territory, we seek to give more of it away. And that's the secret to great marriage. And when you have the ability, which you do in your life, you have the ability to make this happen in your marriage. And when you do that, you'll discover that there is nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. When you choose to submit to one another in the spirit of Ephesians 5, out of your allegiance to Jesus Christ and the kind of relationship He designed for husbands and wives, you will achieve what few people do. Great marriage, till death do you part.
I was 19, you were 21, the year we got engaged. And everyone said we were much too young, but we did it anyway. And we got the rings for 40 each from a pawn shop down the road. And we said our vows and took the leap now 15 years ago. We went dancing in the minefields. We went sailing in the storms. And it was harder than we dreamed, but I believe that's what the promise is for. Well, I do are the two most famous last words, the beginning of the end. But to lose your life for another, I've heard, is a good place to begin. 'Cause the only way to find your life is to lay your own life down. And I believe it's an easy price for the life that we have found. And we're dancing in the minefields.
Don't give up on
And we're sailing in the storms.
Don't give up on
This is harder than we dreamed, but I believe that's what the promise is for. That's what the promise is for. So when I lose my way, find me. And when I lose love's chains, bind me at the end of all my faith, till the end of all my days. When I forget my name, remind me. 'Cause we bear the light of the Son of Man, so there's nothing left to fear. So I'll walk with you in the shadowlands till the shadows disappear. 'Cause He promised not to leave us, and His promises are true. So in the face of chaos, baby, I can dance with you. So let's go dancing in the minefields.
Don't give up on
Let's go sailing in the storms.
Don't give up on
Let's go dancing in the minefield.
Don't give up on
When kicking down the doors.
Don't give up on
Let's go dancing in the minefield.
Don't give up on
When sailing in the storms.
Don't give up on
This is harder than we dreamed, but I believe that's what the promise is for. That's what the promise is for.
There is nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. We know that healthy marriages help strengthen communities and allow the light and love of Jesus to shine. We've got a great way for you to connect with your spouse and begin a conversation about your relationship. Text "Talk to Me" to 94,000 to receive our Conversation Starter Guide. That's talk, the number 2, me, texted to 94,000. We'll also have the guide posted this week on our website at pccwired.net. Thank you for tuning in today. We're praying for great conversations for you this week. And we'll see you back next week as we continue our Relationship Goals series.